are not liked across the borders when Nigerians are in other countries, particularly their immediate neighbors, and they're doing well. There is this, there's this feeling against Nigerians. Where does it come from? Because you do hear this as popular opinion that in other countries, Nigerians are regarded with some form of, you know, they're not really liked. Where does it come from?
I think some of it could just be envy. You know, Nigerians are, you know, very dynamic people, often very successful. We have an unfortunate habit of flaunting our success, and so that's obviously something that would grate, that would not be, you know, so welcome. Nigerians obviously, you know, go to other countries and exude a lot of self-confidence, and so, you know, you can see that, you know, sometimes it is something that would not be as appreciated, and, you know, so there might be sometimes that sense, you know, of lauding it over others. But I think, but I would also disagree with that narrative. You know, as you said when you introduced me, I'd worked in an international
resources and assistance that Nigeria has availed its neighbors has not really translated into Nigerians making both economic and business gains in those countries.
Again, I'm not sure that I would totally agree with that. You know, for instance, as you know, we were in the Gambia, and we visited the Gambia a number of times during the crisis recently, and we came to see that there was a very strong Nigerian business community in the Gambia that one would not have been aware of. The same thing with you know, Senegal, with Sierra Leone, and of course we know with Ghana, you know, Cotonou across the border. And a lot of the Nigerian banks that are being set up in these countries. So I would actually say that, that there's quite a strong Nigerian business community and presence in those countries.
Let's go back to some examples. The Liberian issue, for instance, and people say we'd expected that given the role Nigeria had played in Liberia and Sierra Leone, of course, that it would have been a lot better if we had matched this with a movement of, for instance, or if we had involved the business community, say in the reconstruction of Liberia, to say it like, in terms of reconstruction of infrastructure, Nigerian companies take the lead. People have been looking at such things and say it doesn't really exist. Yes, there's a large business community, but mostly in the informal sector.
Yeah, well, I mean, the question you have to ask with that kind of investment is whether we have, you know, the big companies that can go out there and compete even at the regional level. You know, I remember, for instance, during the regime of President Obasanjo, you know, one of the points that the Nigerian business community was making to the president at the time was that, look, we're not able to compete with international companies because we're all too small. And what we need are bigger conglomerates, you know, Nigerian conglomerates, to be able to take these people on, to be able to project Nigeria's might in a lot of these countries. And I think that was actually what informed the creation of Transcorp at the time, for instance, you know, to try to build big Nigerian companies. So the reason, to answer your question, maybe why we don't see this kind of engagement by Nigeria and some of these countries is we just don't have these huge, you know, conglomerates that can sustain that kind of effort and project that kind of economic power.
Well, Minister, one of the biggest issues in recent times has been that of Nigerians in other countries coming under attacks. And we recall what happened in South Africa. This led so many Nigerians to call for all kinds of things. Well, what is the situation like?
Specifically with South Africa.
With South Africa specifically.
Yeah, you'll recall that I went to South Africa and I asked the Minister of Interior to come with me, and he very kindly accompanied me. So what we did, what I felt was important when we got there, was we wanted a clear deliverable, because this was something that was recurring. It was not the first, it was not the second, it was not the third. So we spoke to the Nigerian community before we met with the government of South Africa. And what I could see immediately that was a missing link was a direct engagement between the so that I thought was a very important deliverable that we believe that would go a long way to addressing a lot of the issues. And of course, as you know, also the issue of compensation kept coming up. And we also felt that this would be a forum in which the Nigerians in South Africa would have access to the higher echelons of the South African government to press for these kinds of demands. So we've set that up, and I asked the Acting High Commissioner to quickly have the first meeting of that committee, because what it does is that you're on the same side. The Nigerians in South Africa and the authorities and the police operators, and really showing that it's not something that they would tolerate, and have given us all the assurances that all the measures will be put in place to ensure that there will not be a repetition. So so that was much more reassuring.
Now, with advancements in technology, it does make the job of administration, well, if they say it eases so many things, it also creates challenges as well. Quite recently, the social media, it's one of the challenges, was awash with footage claimed to have been shot in Libya, showing people in a queue. Some people claim those were Nigerians who have been led to be either killed or thrown out of Libya. You see things like that in the social media. What is the response to that? Now, how can citizens begin to know what is real, what is imagined, or what is cooked up?
Well, this is a very good point. I mean, this is the challenge we have with the social media. We know that a lot of what you see, you cannot believe. I mean, for instance, I saw one of a young girl that was ostensibly in Libya. So by its very nature, they don't want to be documented, and they don't want to appear on the radar. So, people who destroy whatever documentation they have, very often they might claim that they come from different countries. I know when I was in Geneva, in Switzerland, a Nigerian I knew very well, and he was claiming that in the courts that he was a Liberian, and that he was fleeing from the Liberian conflict, and that his family and he was
regular migration. There are some countries that have taken a tough stance against such. Where do we fall in? Sometimes foreign relations might not be clear to citizens. There are Nigerians who propose what they call tit-for-tat diplomacy. If you have a situation where Nigerians are regarded as irregular migrants and are being deported or removed from countries, some Nigerians feel the Nigerian state should be doing the same and taking out nationals of those countries. How do you respond?
So if you are deporting irregular Nigerians from your country, we would not deport regular, migrants in Nigeria. But if they were irregular, we would, of course.
Well, that's presupposing that you do know that you have a huge number of irregular migrants, because some tend to feel that there's a high number of irregular migrants in Nigeria, and not much has been done about that. And sometimes they're from neighboring countries, which we have just accepted as in our role as being our brother's keepers. That kind of demonstration is not seen from those other countries. That's their argument.
That's the argument. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's not, again, totally correct. I mean, we have cases all the time at a lower level of nationals of neighboring countries being deported from Nigeria. And of course, you remember years ago when there was a mass deportation of Ghanaians from Nigeria, for instance. So we do have a history of that. And in fact, a few days ago, actually, we were discussing with one of the neighboring countries regarding recent deportations of Nigerians that we've considered to be refugees and should have been treated in the framework of the refugee laws. And they were also pointing out that a number of their nationals had also recently been
well, this
deported.
ties up with the challenge of the refugee situation that we have all over the world, and Nigeria is not immune from that as well, going by what's been happening in particularly the northeast of Nigeria. And you do have refugees, Nigerians moving to other countries. What is it like at this point in time?
Well, first of all, there's a special category of people that are refugees. Okay, so it's not every migrant or irregular migrant that is classified as a refugee. There are certain criteria. And then they have to be documented and accepted. There's the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, who will, they will be able to determine that these people qualify as refugees and therefore should be treated under the provisions, international provisions for refugees. But to answer your question, yes, we do have, because of the conflict, the security challenges in the northeast, refugees in neighboring countries, Nigerian refugees, in particular in Cameroon. So in Cameroon we have almost up to 60,000 Nigerian refugees. They are documented as refugees, accepted as refugees, and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees supervises accommodation, a camp for them. And we have just signed an agreement with the government of Cameroon, a tripartite agreement, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Nigeria and Cameroon, regarding these refugees and their repatriation. Refugees ordinarily would like to go back to their countries once the environment is conducive. So we do have those problems.
Now, we have also seen numbers of Nigerians who described as returnees. And sometimes we hear they're voluntary returnees from other countries who in recent times have been coming back. And they've had not too good tales about the kind of reception they had in those countries. What's the Foreign Affairs Ministry doing about that in the first place? And these returnees, is there a way to actually ascertain the conditions of their status?
Yeah, well, I think obviously the obvious case is Libya. We don't have a diplomatic presence in Libya at the moment, and the reality is that Libya is, to all intents and purposes, a failed state, at the moment. So we would ordinarily not encourage any Nigerian to go there, but Nigerians do because they see it as a transit point to getting into Europe.
Well, I'm not cutting you, but is there a form of travel advice about going to countries such as Libya? We do hear countries sometimes issuing travel advice to their citizens. We don't hear.
I've heard the returnees say, is that there's been somebody who has told them that, they can get a job in Europe and, if they come on this route and they pay some money. And I think that now it's something that's, human trafficking has been going on for a very long period of time. And the reality is that in the case of Libya, the vast majority of those people would actually qualify as people who have been, trafficked. And there is a huge business, human trafficking. Our president met with the UK Prime Minister, Theresa May, in New York, and 3 other heads of state to start addressing this issue of human trafficking. And you will find that a large number of those across the Sahara, of especially young girls, but also young men, are really cases of illegality, criminal enterprises, human trafficking, and so forth. So it's not really something that lends itself to travel advisory notices, because these are not conventional travelers. So the foreign ministry, we're addressing that together. After the meeting the president had with Theresa May, there's going to be an international conference on this whole issue of human trafficking. And of course we know that too large a number of Nigerians are victims of human trafficking, and we're trying to develop policies. But it's very difficult because, at the end of the day, it really is a question of education and a question of economic opportunities in our country. We're also trying to engage with the European Union in providing vocational training so that a lot of these potential victims of human trafficking can have skills to find, jobs in Nigeria.
Now, we'll return to that in a moment, but now that you speak of the subject of what the missions and the embassies, Nigerian embassies, are meant to do, and the fact that in a place like Libya, we do not have that. What is the state of Nigerian missions in many countries? I mean, there have been disappointing reports about the conditions of Nigerian embassies and missions abroad, and how functional they are, and how Nigerians in the diaspora have had challenges, accessing services at these missions.
Yeah, this is an unfortunate narrative, but you're quite right. It is a narrative that is there. And it's something that we're working, this government is working extremely hard to address. As you know, we're going through a process of induction of ambassadors. So we're going to be sending out, in fact, we're in the process of sending out, about 80 envoys, ambassadors around the world. And during the induction course, it's something that's been hammered to them, the importance of our embassies and our diplomats in those embassies understanding that they are service providers, and having that culture, that mentality, and that professional skill of providing those services.
Of numbers and facilities.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. It's affected them very greatly. In fact, a pending issue that we have with these missions is that because of the drastic fall in the value of the naira, the allocations, are computed in naira and then changed into foreign exchange. So with the sharp fall in the value of the naira, all our embassies around the world have been receiving half, literally half of their allocations, which could not sustain them. So we've had a serious crisis, over the last 9 months in the embassies, not having the funds even to pay those functions.
The closures won't lead to cutback in personnel, staff rationalization? Is that part of it as well?
Yes. The rationalization has to be, because a lot of our missions are also actually over bloated, and we have not maintained very good practices in the past. What we've had in the past, unfortunately, is you've had envoys, heads of missions and embassies. They'll go there, they will recruit relatives as local staff and so forth, and put on the payroll, because we have an ideal number of employees for missions around the world, within a range, and all of them are way above that.
Into the discovery of large amounts of foreign and local currencies by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, in a residential apartment at Osborne Towers, Ikoyi, Lagos, over which the National Intelligence Agency, NIA, has made a claim. The investigation is also to inquire into the circumstances in which the NIA came into the possession of the funds, how and by whose authority the funds were made available to the NIA and to establish whether or not there has been a breach of the law or security procedure in obtaining custody and use of the funds. President Muhammadu Buhari has also directed the suspension of the Director General of the NIA, Ambassador Ayoke, pending the outcome of the investigation. A three-man committee comprising the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice and the National Security Advisor, headed by the Vice President, is to conduct both investigations. The committee is to submit its report to the President within 14 days. The most senior permanent secretary in the SGF office and the most senior officer in the NIA are to act respectively during the period of the investigation. We now continue with our scheduled programs. Thank you.
Travel ban in some countries. While Nigeria is not on that list officially, it's been alleged that all kinds of maneuvers have been used to prevent legitimately qualified Nigerians from entry. There are reports of some Nigerians being turned back, Nigerians who had valid visas. What do you have to say in response to these reports, and what is the true position of things regarding movement of Nigerians into the U.S. with its current policies?
I think I have heard of 4 cases, of 4 people who have complained that they had difficulties at the borders. And when you consider the number of Nigerians who go to the U.S., it's really an insignificant amount, Then the other thing I would like to say is that, a valid visa does not give you a right of entry into any country. Interestingly, the immigration officer that you meet has full discretion as to whether to let you into the country or not. This is a sad reality of immigration policies of all the countries, including Nigeria. We have cases of people we've turned back at the border of Nigeria who have, good travel documents. And there are other countries, African as well, that have turned back, that I have had to intervene personally, where Nigerians with valid visas have been turned back at the border. So this is a reality, and it's not something that's peculiar to the United States. With regards to the U.S., as I said, the numbers are relatively small, and what we've done is we've asked them to bring them to our attention. If they've been able to get into the U.S. after, maybe a difficult process, to report to our missions, and if not, to come back to us. And I have received a WhatsApp message from a Nigerian that said that they were not allowed into the U.S., and we're processing that in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we're talking about single-digit numbers.
Right, but it's not as if there is any official restriction on Nigerians traveling to the U.S.
No, on the contrary, the U.S. government has come out to state categorically that there isn't.
Well, Minister, Nigeria is fighting on all fronts to move forward, and one of the big challenges of this administration is in repatriating funds that are stashed in other countries. Given Nigeria's relations with these countries, where it is believed most of the loot is stashed in, why is it extremely difficult to have these funds repatriated? People are saying, even where countries have agreed, they have put in all kinds of conditions. It's even reported that some of the countries are insisting that they would have to know what these funds would be deployed to. What's the situation like?
Well, the situation is, yes, you're right. It can be extremely difficult getting funds repatriated. And for that reason, Nigeria sponsored at the United Nations a resolution on the illicit flow of funds to try to compel countries to do a lot more in facilitating repatriation of funds. And this has been now passed at the UN. And that was kudos to Nigerian diplomacy. That's one thing. The other thing is that, you know, a lot of these countries have legal procedures. So the government themselves have no power, you know, to direct that, you know, these funds should be repatriated to the country. If they did, you know, they would have done so. I mean, we know for a fact that under President Obama, they really went the extra mile in helping us to identify and recover stolen loot, the Swiss government as well. But they are also subject to their own laws of their countries. And so, you know, you have to go through the legal process. You have to prove that it's stolen. You have to prove that, you know, it belongs rightly to the government. And there's so many legal hurdles. And so when you have situations where there are people contesting that, as we've had in many cases, the Nigerians will come up and say, no, 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 I'm entitled to that money. It was not stolen. Then unfortunately, you have to just go through that process. But as I said, the UN resolution and others, Mr. President has done a fantastic job in putting it at the top of the international agenda. You know, so these countries are now very much on board in terms of trying to help developing countries, you know, recover their stolen loot. And it's a work in progress, but it's true. The Swiss, for instance, have in their laws, and they showed me the provisions, that when for them to be allowed to restitute funds, they have to be shown, they have to be sure of what it's going to be applied for. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. We're sovereign countries.
Well, these are the issues that many Nigerians cannot understand, because the popular opinion on the streets would be, it's our money.
We can do what we want with it. But this is only with regards to Switzerland. There's no other country that I know that has a similar provision. And I took this up with the Swiss foreign minister. I said, well, listen, we're a sovereign country, you know, and this is our money. And you accept that this is our money. And they said, well, we're really sorry, these are the provisions. It applies not just to Nigeria, but to any other country. And if we don't agree, and we had to, it took us some time to agree on the projects that those monies would be applied to, it will not be possible for us to restitute. So it's not an easy job. The Attorney General is doing a great job, and as I said, Mr. President has laid the framework, and a lot of the leaders of the Western world are really on board, and you know, slowly but surely we're getting there.
There have also been pledges from some major countries about lending a hand to Nigeria in its fight against insurgency, but again, it's seen most of the time as what's been propagated in the media, and how much of that support actually comes through, given our relations with these countries?
A lot. Well, it depends how you, I mean, we can start from our immediate neighbors. We have a multinational joint task force, Cameroon, Chad, Niger, you know, Benin. And we're all cooperating, and we really, Western countries, a lot of them are forthcoming. We know that the US Congress is not as you know, supportive with regards to certain kinds of weaponry. Like there's a night vision equipment for planes. The Super Tucana, for instance, has been blocked in the US Congress because there are, I think, about 3 or 4, you know, senators that have issues with some of the stories they're hearing about human rights violations in the Northeast, and for that reason they're blocking the sale of Super Tucana planes to Nigeria. But we're engaging with the US, and we've heard some very positive words from Nigeria is a very attractive bride, you know, to many, to most countries of the world, and we have, you know, we are indeed, we're a big market for many countries, so we do have leverage, we do have, you know, a bargaining power, but you're right, you're absolutely right. I think the basic premise of your question is right, that every country, as I said to you at the outset, you know, is them first, it's China first, it's the US first. Trump is not saying anything new. It's Germany first, it's Britain first, you know, and it should be also Nigeria first, and it is Nigeria first. So there's no country out there that is going to have as its prime objective making Nigeria a great country. You know, it's not going to happen, and it's not going to be. So we have to do what we have to do in engaging these countries to ensure that it inures to the benefit of our country.
Back to the regional body, you have set up put a mechanism in place to ensure that when Nigeria goes out for positions, regional positions, for instance, it gets all the support that's arising from what happened the last time we sought a position here. How far with that? And well, it ties into what we have always said, that we're the big brother, but when it comes to seeking positions, the other countries are not in a hurry to grant Nigeria that support.
Well, I don't know. You know, we don't do too badly in terms of position. You know, we have the ADB. You know, we have a Deputy Secretary General of the UN, and you know, and a number of other positions. But your point is
Gas pipelines are the arteries for powering electricity. When the artery is burst, then the entire system collapses. Vandalizing gas pipelines is a criminal offense against the Nigerian people. Let us join hands and protect our gas pipelines from the enemies of Nigeria. Report any suspected vandal to the security operatives. Let us stop vandals before they destroy our collective national heritage, so we can have the Nigeria of our dreams, where there will be light at all times. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
1960s, when he was a political prisoner and South Africa was under the law of apartheid to the time of his death, he was amongst the world's most admired people. Mandela inspired songs, poems, sculptures, movies, and drawings. A lot of artists were equally drawn to the man and also what he stood for. Elizabeth Alexandra, a poet, once wrote a poem for Nelson Mandela which had the lines, "Nelson Mandela is with me because I believe in symbols. Symbols bear power." As a child in the 80s in Nigeria, it will be hard to forget Majek Fashek's music, Free Nelson Mandela, from his I&I Experience album.
Song is dedicated to the prisoner of conscience, Nelson Mandela, and to all the freedom fighters all over the earth, because Africa must be free.
Idris Elba starred in a movie titled Long Walk to Freedom, which is an adaptation of Nelson Mandela's autobiography. And just few minutes into the premiere of the movie at a cinema in London, Nelson Mandela passed away.
I've walked a long walk to freedom. It has been a lonely road, and it is not over yet. No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin. People learn to hate.
Paul Blancant, a painter, said he enjoyed working on Nelson Mandela's portrait because each stripe and color was placed with respect and utmost love. The artwork was displayed in New York's Times Square in USA. Mandela, who was a universal being, has been captured in other art forms, like photography, with a graceful smile.
Good afternoon. Here is the breaking news. President Muhammadu Buhari has ordered an investigation into the allegations of violations of law and due process made against the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, SGF, David Babachir Lawal, and the award of contracts under the Presidential Initiative on the Northeast Pine. The President has also directed the suspension of the SGF from office pending the outcome of the investigations. In a related development, the President has ordered a full-scale investigation into the discovery of large amounts of foreign and local currencies by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, in a residential apartment at Osborne Towers, Ikoyi, Lagos.
This is the network service of the NTA.
Lot more to do about the packaging, remuneration of the players, and sponsorship. I think it's generally not particularly packaged well yet as the male football.
Okay, we are talking about the Super Falcons today,
Yes.
and the reason why we're talking about the league is because 80% of the female national team players have been drawn from the local league in Nigeria in the past. But now, since we don't have viable female football league in Nigeria, how are we going to get the best for us to put together a formidable female national team that can